Morning.
My name is Sonny, and today I decided to focus on the 1920s, which a lot of times, like, when you think about the 1920s, you think about the flapper girls with their short hair and dancing and, like, the extravagant lifestyle, but when you think about it more in depth and you focus more on history, you realize that actually a lot of things have happened, such as, like, women's suffrage and prohibition and things like that. So I'll be touching upon those things and reflecting it upon the flapper type style. Okay, so during the 1920s, the young generation, they were called the Lost Generation. It was coined by Ernest Hemingway, who's a literary
Genius.
genius, yes, and thank you. And he coined it the Lost Generation because he thought that the older generation before them heartlessly like shipped off his generation to fight during World War I because a lot of people died during that time. So it was kind of like the lost generation, as they did a lot of them did. And so the lost generation, they felt like they wanted to rebel against the Victorian age, which is the age that came before the 1920s. And during the Victorian age, they had a lot of like long, flowy dresses. They didn't wear makeup, or not very much, and they looked really like dowdy and plain, and they're just kind of drab, you know. And so, in rebellion to that Victorian age, they wanted to, like, you know, just kind of. I hope this isn't proof, but or like bad, but you know, like. Flip the bird to the older generation, and they decided to wear shorter dresses, which were dresses that hit like above the knee, which was like totally new because usually in the Victorian age they like wore dresses that were around the ankles. And so yeah, they wore shorter dresses and they were sleeveless, which was like showing a woman's arm was not common at all. But yeah, so they totally changed the way women's fashion was, and that was all thanks to Coco Chanel. As you all know, this is international, of course. You know who Chanel is. She was the first to introduce the little black dress, which I know we all have in our closet, right? Most of us have in our closet, yes. But yeah, so Coco Chanel, she introduced a more of a boyish, like, silhouette. They didn't want the curvy and womanly figure that the Victorian age, like, you know, liked. So instead, they would wrap their chests, so then their chests were flat, and then they would have like a lower waist. So like usually the waist is here. They would drop the waist, so then their figure was more straight, like a prepubescent boy, basically. But yeah, so that's the style that they liked. They wanted to move away from the super womanly style, but still have some sexuality because, you know, they're showing more skin and they're wearing makeup and stuff. Let's see, further on, sorry, just a second. As I mentioned earlier, women were able to vote during this time. It was passed, like, in the late probably 1918, they started the women's suffrage thing, and then, like, on August 18, 1920, they finally ratified that, the women's suffrage thing, and so women were allowed to vote. And so I feel like women during that time, because they had more freedom and they had a voice in society, they felt more confident about themselves because they were like, I could vote, you know? So, I feel like women, with that confidence, they were able to cut their hair short. So I like to see it as shearing off their hair, the long locks that were once like holding them down, right? And so during that time, women liked to have Marcel waves or shingle waves. They liked to have the bob cut. I attempted a finger wave, but it did not happen. But there is some little bits of wave here. And yeah, they also liked to curl their hair if they had longer hair, they would just pull it back into a bun and pretend like they had a bob. And they didn't like to show their ears for some reason, so they always covered it with like some sort of bun in the beginning. And then later on in the decade, they were like, forget it, you know, and then they showed more style. But that was the beginning. And so, let's see. Since women wanted to cut their hair, the salons or the hairstylists that they would go to wouldn't know how to cut short hair because, you know, they mainly worked on long hair because that was the norm at that time. So they had to shift towards the barber shops. And when they went to the barber shops, the barbers were like, I don't know how to cut your hair. And so eventually they had to learn how to cut women's hair. And at first they were kind of annoyed about that because they were like, I don't know how to do this. But once like this style became super popular, like their business started to boom, and so they had to learn how to cut women's hair, and that was established through the, as Ms. Cox mentioned, the barbers. Oh, hold on, I'm gonna get the name right so I don't mess it up. The Associated Master Barbers of America, which was founded in Chicago in 1924, and then later on, like nowadays, is called the Associated Masters of Barbers and Beauticians of America. But yeah, that basically, after that, established what like barbers and cosmetologists are supposed to know, so then they can cut hair. So then they're not like standing there not knowing what to do for their clients. And with that, there was also prohibition, which prohibition was like a time where people, like alcohol was banned. And so I feel like everyone loves their booze. So there has to be some way where people got their booze, right? And so there were like gangsters and stuff like that who would open speakeasies, which were places where people could go to drink like secretly. And so with that culture, it like boomed up the flapper type girl, which was like a more promiscuous type of girl. And she would have the short haircut, of course, the waves or the finger waves, and she would wear a headband. She wore makeup, which was like unheard of at the time, or not really unheard of, but like kind of frowned upon because they were seen as more sexualized, I guess. And so they put on like white powder and then like mascara and eyeliner. Then they drew in really thin eyebrows, like just this one line, you know. And then they like to accentuate the cupid's bow when they put on makeup or like their lipstick. And so it was totally different from the Victorian age. But yeah, after that there was the Harlem Renaissance, which was also important during this time because a lot of Southern African Americans moved up to the north, and they settled in Harlem, New York. And that was where like jazz culture finally like boomed. And you know, when you picture the 1920s, you picture like a dark and kind of shady club, you know, with a jazz band playing at the front, and then like people are dancing like the Charleston dance or whatever it is. And like, you know, that just embraced all of that culture. And I feel like the 1920s really like embraced and adopted like African American culture and jazz music and stuff like that. So that was also a really good time for them to accentuate their style and to rebel against the past. And as Mr. He mentioned that technology was advancing, and so during this time they had like washing machines and things like that, so women didn't have to slave away and like wash their clothes by hand and then like hang it up to dry. So instead they just had a washing machine and threw it in, and then they had a bunch of free time. So with that free time, they wanted to fill it with something. They're not just going to sit and watch paint dry, right? And so they turned to entertainment, which is like listening to the radio, like you said, or like watching motion pictures, which were starting to be a big thing. And with that, they saw advertisements and stuff like that, so that like it was basically the start of the cosmetology industry because they you know, they saw their movie stars and they were like, oh man, she's so beautiful, like I want to look exactly like her. So they would go buy like makeup or cut their hair like that. And yeah, the 1920s was the roaring 20s, as you know, but I like to, I'm gonna coin this phrase, okay? Like, it's here and now. I'd like to call it the sharing 20s because they cut the hair. They cut it off the hair, right? But anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Very good.